So before I dive into this insane story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our community for more wild revenge stories, shocking betrayals, and unbelievable comebacks. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next because this one is a roller coaster. Alright, here it goes. I never thought I'd be telling the internet about one of the most humiliating and yet satisfying experiences of my life. But sometimes life throws you into situations that feel straight out of a movie, and you either stay quiet or you share it to remind others that karma always finds its way back. And this, my friends, is exactly what happened to me at my own brother's wedding, when his fiancée decided to publicly humiliate me in front of more than 150 people. At that moment, I wanted the ground to swallow me whole, but what she didn't realize was that she had just handed me the perfect opportunity for the most brutal comeback she could ever imagine. Now, let me give you a little background. My name is Michael. I'm the younger brother in my family, and growing up I was always considered the more quiet, reserved type. My older brother, James, was the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. And honestly, I didn't mind that. I was happy staying in my lane, focusing on my career, keeping to myself, and living a pretty low-key life. But the dynamic between us became more complicated when James started dating Lily, the woman who would later become his fiancée, and for a brief period, almost his wife. From the very beginning, Lily rubbed me the wrong way. She wasn't outright hostile at first, but there was this air of superiority around her, like she was constantly sizing people up and deciding who was worth her time. With me, she didn't even try to hide her disdain. She made subtle comments about my job, comparing it unfavorably to James's more flashy career. She'd throw little jabs about how I wasn't married yet, how I didn't dress fancy enough, and how I was still living like a college kid. It was all little things that I brushed off at first, because hey, if my brother was happy, I wasn't going to rock the boat. But over time, those little digs added up, and I realized she had absolutely no respect for me. Fast forward to the wedding day. The venue was packed. Friends, family, co-workers, about 150 people all dressed to the nines, buzzing with excitement. James looked happy, and I was genuinely glad for him. Despite my feelings about Lily, I wanted him to have a good life, and I was willing to support him. I had even bought a gift that, while not extravagant, was meaningful and personal. But apparently, meaningful wasn't good enough for Lily. During the reception, right before the speeches, Lily approached me in front of a small group of guests and made a snide remark about how she hoped I had brought something worthy of the occasion. I tried to laugh it off, telling her that gifts aren't about price tags but about thoughtfulness. She smirked, clearly unimpressed. I thought that would be the end of it, but no, she wasn't done. Moments later, in the middle of the hall, with the band quieting down and people's attention drifting toward us, Lily suddenly turned to me and said, loud enough for half the room to hear, "So what did you even bring us, Michael? Or did you come empty-handed like always?" People chuckled awkwardly, not sure if it was a joke or a jab. I felt my ears burning, my heart racing. Before I could even answer, she stepped closer, looked me dead in the eye, and with this smug little smile on her face, she slapped me. The sound echoed. The chatter in the hall died instantly. 150 people turned and stared as I stood there, stunned, my cheek burning from the sting. My brother froze. My parents gasped. Some guests even laughed nervously, thinking it had to be some weird prank. But it wasn't. Lily had just humiliated me in front of everyone, reducing me to a punchline at what was supposed to be a joyous event. Now, I'm not the type to cause a scene. My instinct in that moment was to walk away, and that's exactly what I did. I could feel eyes burning holes in my back as I left the hall, my pride shattered. But while I was walking away, something inside me shifted. I realized I didn't deserve this. I had done nothing but support my brother, and this entitled woman had made me her target for no reason other than her own ego. And that's when I remembered something, the secret I had been keeping for weeks. You see, a few months before the wedding, I had accidentally stumbled across some very questionable messages on Lily's phone. She had left it unattended during a family gathering, and a text notification popped up. I didn't mean to snoop, but curiosity got the better of me. What I found was shocking. There were messages between Lily and another man, flirty, late-night conversations, plans to meet up when James wasn't around. It wasn't just innocent talk. It was clear evidence of an emotional, possibly even physical affair. At the time, I didn't know what to do with that information. I debated telling James, but I also didn't want to be accused of meddling or trying to ruin his relationship. So I quietly took screenshots and sent them to myself, just in case. And now, standing outside that hall, my cheeks still stinging from that slap, I knew exactly what I had to do. Lily thought she had won, but she had no idea what was coming next. I re-entered the hall, trying to compose myself. People whispered, their eyes darting between me and Lily. The band struck up a tune, trying to lighten the mood, but the tension was thick. When it came time for speeches, I volunteered to go first. Lily smirked again, clearly thinking I was about to apologize or make a fool of myself. But what I actually did changed everything. I took the microphone, smiled politely, and began by congratulating James and Lily. I thanked everyone for being there, for celebrating love and family. And then, with the calmest voice I could muster, I said, "But before we raise our glasses, I think it's important to be honest, especially on a day that's supposed to be about truth and commitment." And with that, I connected my phone to the projector. The first screenshot appeared on the screen behind me. Gasps filled the hall as Lily's private texts lit up in front of 150 guests. Flirty emojis, late-night confessions, and messages planning secret meetups. All of it undeniable. My brother's face turned pale. Lily's jaw dropped. She rushed toward me, trying to grab the microphone. But it was too late. The evidence was there for everyone to see. In that moment, I felt the sting of the slap vanish, replaced by a deep sense of justice. Lily had tried to humiliate me, but instead, she had exposed herself. The moment those messages lit up on the big screen, the atmosphere in the hall shifted from polite celebration to absolute chaos. Gasps echoed like thunder. People whispered furiously to one another, and Lily stood frozen in place, her hand covering her mouth, her face drained of all color. For someone who had walked around all day acting superior, flaunting her arrogance and humiliating me like I was beneath her, she suddenly looked very small. James, my brother, sat there stiff, staring at the screen as if his whole world had just shattered. His fork clattered onto the plate, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. He didn't say a word at first, but you could see the storm raging in his eyes. My parents looked horrified, my mother clutching her chest, my father shaking his head in disbelief. Guests were murmuring loudly, some even pulling out their phones to record the chaos, because of course, in today's world, nobody misses the chance to capture a scandal. Lily finally snapped out of her shock and rushed toward me, hissing under her breath for me to stop, pleading that I didn't know the full story. She tried to grab the microphone from my hands, but I stepped back, keeping my voice calm and steady. I told the crowd I didn't want to ruin this wedding, but I wasn't going to let someone humiliate me and get away with it. What you're seeing is the truth, and my brother deserves to know it before it's too late. The crowd erupted with mixed reactions. Some gasped in sympathy for James. Others muttered in disgust at Lily's behavior. A few shook their heads, whispering how shameless she must be to slap me earlier and then get exposed so brutally in the same evening. And then James finally spoke, his voice low but trembling with fury. "Is this true, Lily?" he asked, his eyes locked on her, demanding an answer. Lily stammered, trying to compose herself. She claimed it was just harmless flirting, that the messages were being taken out of context, that she was lonely because James worked long hours. Excuses, one after the other, spilling out like a desperate child caught in a lie. But no excuse could explain the messages that clearly showed intent to cheat. James, who had been loyal and devoted, looked at her like he didn't even recognize the woman standing in front of him. The guests began taking sides. Some relatives pulled James aside, urging him to walk away right there, to save himself from future heartbreak. Others whispered that maybe it could be worked out, though their voices sounded weak and uncertain. My parents looked crushed. They had supported this wedding financially, invested their hearts into it, and now they realized the woman they welcomed into the family had been deceiving everyone. Meanwhile, Lily's parents sat in silence, their faces burning with shame. Her father avoided eye contact with anyone, while her mother tried to stand and defend her, saying that every relationship has ups and downs and that maybe people shouldn't judge so harshly. But the damage was already done. The humiliation wasn't private anymore. It was public, undeniable, and unforgettable. And let me tell you, the same people who laughed awkwardly when Lily slapped me earlier were now whispering about how she had dug her own grave. Karma couldn't have been more poetic. James finally stood up, his voice louder this time, filled with betrayal and rage. You embarrassed my brother in front of everyone. You humiliated him for no reason. And now, after everything I've seen, you want me to believe this was just harmless fun? No. We're done. Right here, right now. The hall went silent again. Lily burst into tears, dropping to her knees, begging him to reconsider. She tried to grab his hands, sobbing about how she didn't mean for things to go this far, that she loved him, that she made a mistake. But James shook her off, his face pale but resolute. You made your choice long before tonight. And now I've made mine, he said coldly. Guests began leaving their seats, some comforting James, others glaring at Lily as if she were contagious. A few even muttered about how she had always seemed fake, how they had always felt something was off about her. Isn't it funny how people suddenly admit the truth when the mask falls off? At that point, Lily's humiliation was complete. She had slapped me to assert dominance, to prove she was untouchable, but instead she was the one exposed, rejected, and left in tears in front of everyone she wanted to impress. The same people she wanted to look superior to were now watching her break down, whispering about her betrayal. My brother walked out of the hall, my parents following him, relatives trailing behind in support. Lily was left standing there, her makeup streaked with tears, her expensive gown feeling like a costume she no longer deserved to wear. People avoided her, and the once celebratory atmosphere had turned into a scandal-filled disaster that nobody would forget for years. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than anything I could have said. I simply set the microphone down, looked her in the eye one last time, and walked away, my pride finally restored. The sting of the slap was gone, replaced with something far more powerful: vindication. Later that night, my brother came to me privately. His eyes were red, his voice hoarse, but he hugged me tight and said, "Thank you. You saved me from a lifetime of misery." For the first time in years, I felt like the little brother who had finally earned his respect. What Lily thought would be the ultimate humiliation for me turned into her ultimate downfall. And let me tell you, sometimes revenge doesn't need fists or shouting. Sometimes the truth, exposed at the right time, is the sharpest weapon of all. The day that was supposed to be a wedding celebration turned into one of the most unforgettable scandals in our family's history. By the time the guests began filing out of the venue, there was no mistaking the truth. The wedding was over before it had even begun. The decorations still hung from the ceiling. The food was untouched on the tables. The music was silenced, and yet all people could talk about was the explosive drama that had just unfolded. Lily, the bride-to-be, had not only slapped me in front of everyone, but had also been exposed for cheating on my brother, and now her reputation was in tatters. James sat outside with my parents for a long time, silent and shaken. He wasn't just hurt, he was humiliated, because everyone who mattered to him had just witnessed the collapse of his relationship in real time. But as painful as that moment was, it was also the exact moment he realized how lucky he was to get out before it was too late. Had this been discovered months or years later, after vows, kids, and property were involved, the damage would have been 10 times worse. Word travels fast in families, and within hours, the story spread beyond the wedding guests. Relatives who weren't even present began calling, asking if it was true that Lily had been exposed for cheating during her own wedding reception. Some were shocked. Some claimed they always had a bad feeling about her, and some even laughed at the absurdity of the situation. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages, some praising me for standing up for myself, others asking for every juicy detail. I wasn't trying to become the center of gossip, but once a scandal like that breaks, there's no controlling it. As for Lily, her downfall was immediate. She tried reaching out to James over the next few days, leaving long voice messages about how she had made a mistake and how she could change, but James never answered. The screenshots had already circulated among family and even coworkers, and no matter what she said, nobody was willing to trust her again. Friends who once praised her perfect relationship with James suddenly kept their distance. Even on social media, people noticed she went silent, deleting photos and turning off comments after waves of criticism hit her profiles. For someone who thrived on looking perfect and superior, it was her worst nightmare. Meanwhile, James was going through his own process. At first, he was broken, ashamed, and angry. He didn't want to leave the house. He didn't want to talk to anyone. He told me one night, "I feel like a fool." I was about to marry someone who didn't even respect me. I reminded him that he wasn't a fool. He was blinded by love, and that happens to the best of us. The important thing was that he found out before it was too late. Slowly, with support from family and friends, he started to rebuild his confidence. I'll admit, part of me felt guilty. Even though I had done the right thing, exposing Lily publicly, I knew it had crushed my brother. But he assured me time and again that I had saved him. "You didn't ruin my wedding," he said. "Lily did. You saved me from wasting my life." And hearing those words helped me let go of the guilt. What made the whole situation even more ironic was how entitled Lily had always been. She used to look down on me because I wasn't flashy or rich. She acted like I was beneath her, not worthy of her attention. Yet, in the end, it was me, the quiet, underestimated younger brother, who had the power to bring her facade crashing down. That slap she gave me wasn't just an act of cruelty, it was the spark that lit the fire of her own downfall. Over the weeks that followed, James threw himself into his work, spending more time with people who genuinely cared for him. Slowly, he started to laugh again. He reconnected with old friends he had lost touch with because Lily never liked them. He even began traveling for work, meeting new people, rediscovering the life he had put on hold for a relationship that was nothing but toxic. It was inspiring to watch. And as for me, I noticed something too. For years, I had lived in James's shadow, the quiet sibling nobody really paid attention to. But after that night, people started treating me differently. Relatives who once dismissed me now respected me. Friends reached out, telling me I had guts for standing up the way I did. Even at work, when a few colleagues heard about the story through the grapevine, they praised me for handling myself with dignity and patience instead of lashing out in anger. For once, I wasn't just the younger brother. I was the guy who had stood up for himself and exposed the truth. Of course, the gossip didn't die overnight. For months, whenever there was a family gathering, someone would inevitably bring up that wedding. It became a kind of legend. The night when the bride slapped the groom's brother and ended up destroying her own marriage before it even started. At first, it annoyed me, but then I realized it wasn't a bad legacy to have. It was proof that sometimes karma doesn't take years to arrive. Sometimes it's instant, and sometimes it's public. Lily eventually moved out of town, probably trying to escape the embarrassment. Rumors floated around that the man she was texting never actually committed to her, leaving her even more alone. I don't know if that's true, and honestly, I don't care. She made her choices, and she paid the price. My brother may have been hurt, but he walked away free. No legal battles, no divorce papers, no years of wasted effort. Just one painful night that turned into the beginning of a better life. Looking back, I realized this story isn't just about revenge. It's about standing up for yourself when someone tries to belittle you. It's about exposing entitled people who think they can walk all over others without consequences. And it's about how chaos, betrayal, and humiliation can sometimes turn into comebacks that inspire not just the people involved, but everyone who hears the story. What Lily intended as my humiliation turned into her undoing. What started as my lowest moment, standing there with a stinging cheek in front of 150 guests, became my greatest moment of strength. And in the end, it wasn't just me who got justice. My brother got it too, and that's what matters most. In the weeks and months that followed, life slowly began to settle, but the echoes of that night never really faded. People still brought it up from time to time, almost like a family legend, and each retelling carried the same mix of shock and disbelief. It's not every day that a wedding turns into a scandal, and it's certainly not every day that the bride herself orchestrates her own downfall. What stuck with me the most wasn't just the chaos of that evening, but the lessons buried in it. Lessons about respect, honesty, and how quickly arrogance can turn into humiliation. I kept thinking back to the moment Lily raised her hand and slapped me in front of all those guests. In that split second, she wasn't just trying to hurt me physically. She wanted to establish control, to make me small, to reduce me to nothing more than a joke in front of 150 witnesses. But what she failed to realize was that power built on cruelty never lasts. For every entitled person who thinks they can humiliate others without consequence, there's always a reckoning waiting around the corner. For Lily, that reckoning came almost instantly, and it came in a way she could never escape. James's journey after that night was something that inspired me deeply. At first, he was broken, carrying not just the pain of betrayal but the embarrassment of having it revealed in such a public way. But over time, he rebuilt himself. He focused on his career, poured his energy into hobbies he had neglected, and surrounded himself with people who genuinely cared about him. He no longer tried to please someone who only valued status and appearances. He started valuing himself more, and that shift was powerful to witness. I remember one evening, months after the canceled wedding, James and I sat on the porch together, sharing a drink. He looked at me and said, "You know, for a long time I thought I had to settle because I was afraid of being alone. But now I realize being alone is better than being with the wrong person. You saved me from wasting years of my life." Hearing those words gave me a sense of peace. All the guilt I had carried about exposing Lily, all the doubts about whether I had gone too far, they vanished. I knew then that I had done the right thing. As for Lily, she became a cautionary tale. The same people she used to try and impress now whispered about her downfall. Former friends distanced themselves, coworkers lost respect, and her name became synonymous with betrayal in our circles. Even if she tried to rebuild her image elsewhere, the truth was out there, and it followed her like a shadow. That's the thing about entitlement and deceit. Once people see your true colors, you can't just paint over them. What this whole experience taught me is that revenge doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from patience, from holding on to the truth until the right moment. If I had lashed out when she slapped me, people might have seen me as the aggressor. If I had confronted her privately, she might have denied everything and manipulated my brother into believing her. But by staying calm and revealing the truth at the exact moment she tried to humiliate me, I let her actions undo her. It wasn't me against her. It was her own lies against reality. And that's something we often see in stories like this. Entitled people digging their own graves. They think they're untouchable, but they forget that arrogance blinds them. They don't see the trap they're setting for themselves until it's too late. Lily thought she had control, but the second those messages flashed on the screen, she realized she had built her empire on sand. For anyone listening to this story, I think the takeaway is simple. Never let someone's arrogance convince you that you're less than them. Don't let entitled people walk all over you. And if you're ever put in a position where someone tries to humiliate you unjustly, remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting back. Sometimes the best revenge is letting the truth speak louder than any insult or slap could ever hurt. To this day, when I think about that night, I don't feel anger anymore. I don't feel the sting of the slap or the humiliation of being mocked. What I feel is pride. Pride that I stood up for myself, pride that I protected my brother, and pride that I didn't stoop to her level. Because that's the other side of revenge. It's not about becoming cruel like the person who hurt you. It's about restoring balance, about making sure justice is served without losing yourself in the process. James eventually moved on. He dated again, cautiously at first, and with a lot more awareness of red flags. He's happier now, more grounded, and stronger because of what he went through. And me? I walked away from that night with a new sense of confidence. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the quiet little brother in someone else's shadow. I felt like someone who had finally found his voice. And maybe that's the ultimate comeback. Not just exposing the entitled person, not just watching karma play out, but walking away stronger, wiser, and more respected than before. That's the kind of revenge that lasts. So to anyone who's ever been slapped, mocked, or humiliated by someone who thought they were better than you, remember this story. Remember that arrogance always carries the seeds of its own destruction. And remember that the best comebacks aren't about hurting others. They're about standing tall when others try to knock you down. Thanks for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it and want more real-life tales of betrayal, revenge, and inspiring comebacks, make sure you subscribe because there are plenty more where this came from. And as always, remember, karma doesn't miss. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's instant, but it always arrives right on time.